you see what I'm getting, Jack?
You mean I can get all these things with S&H green stamps?
Thank you for calling 1-800-COLLECT.
Do you ever miss those unforgettable things from the 1970s? The ones that made daily life feel a little more real? From avocado kitchens to after-school rituals, these were the rhythms and objects that shaped how we lived, laughed, and got by. What changed so slowly that we forgot it ever mattered? There was nothing quite like playing outside until the streetlights came on. That moment the sun started dipping low and the orange haze filled your neighborhood. That was your cue. No phones, no schedules, just pure, unfiltered freedom. Whether it was kick the can, hide and seek, or just riding your banana seat bike in circles for no reason at all, everything felt like magic. Back then, parents didn't track your every step. You just had to be back before dinner, or when the streetlights flickered on, whichever came first. And man, that light, it hit like a final boss battle. You could squeeze in just one more game before you had to run back home breathless and grinning. There was a kind of independence that came with roaming the neighborhood with your friends and a kind of joy in not having anything better to do. Even falling and scraping your knee felt epic because you earned it from living. Not everything needs a smartphone. Some of the best childhood memories came from running around barefoot, covered in grass stains, with no adult in sight. You didn't need a plan, you just needed your friends, a little daylight, and some imagination. Try telling kids today that climbing trees and chasing fireflies was the highlight of your summer, and watch their eyebrows go up like you're talking about ancient folklore. The Sears wish book was the stuff of dreams. No exaggeration. That thick holiday catalog landed in your mailbox, and suddenly it was like holding a piece of Christmas magic in your hands. You didn't flip through it, you studied it. Page by page, circle after circle. From action figures and toy trains to easy-bake ovens and football helmets, it was the original childhood Pinterest board. Long before two-day shipping and shopping apps, there was this big, glossy book full of endless possibilities. And let's be honest, nobody actually read the clothing section unless you were forced to. It was all about the toys, the gadgets, and the stuff you would daydream about getting if you were just good enough this year. If you were lucky, your parents let you dog-ear the pages or even mark your top picks in pen. That was serious business. Because once it was in ink, it felt like a contract with Santa himself. And the paper? That weird mix between glossy and grainy that somehow smelled like December. You'd sit there cross-legged on the carpet, highlighter in hand, planning out a dream haul that even the North Pole would have trouble delivering. Kids today will never know the thrill of flipping through a catalog so packed with hope that it almost made waiting worth it. The Sears wish book wasn't just a magazine, it was a ritual. Listening to Kasem's Top 40 on Sundays was like having a best friend who knew every song on the radio and all the gossip behind it. You didn't just hear music, you got stories, you got drama, you got a full-on emotional roller coaster with Casey's voice guiding you through it like some wise, funky uncle. It wasn't just background noise, it was a full-on event. The countdown was sacred. You'd grab a blank cassette tape, hover your fingers over the record button, and pray nobody called the house phone while you were taping your favorite track. And if you missed a song, you had to wait an entire week for it to hopefully climb the charts again. Casey had this way of making every song feel personal, like he was talking just to you. And those long-distance dedications? Forget about it. Instant tears. Whether it was Chicago or Carole King, every track had a backstory that made it hit that much harder. You'd lay on your bed, eyes closed, volume just right, and for that 1 hour, it was like time stood still. No distractions, no skipping tracks, just pure golden era radio magic. It was where you first heard Fleetwood Mac, where you learned what the Eagles were really singing about, and where you felt cool just knowing the lyrics. It wasn't just a chart, it was a soundtrack to your life. That smell, you know the one. Fresh Ditto copies in school had this unforgettable scent that hit you the moment the teacher passed them out. It was like glue, rubbing alcohol, and weird magic all at once. But somehow, it was amazing. Every kid in class would lift the paper to their nose, take a big whiff, and just zone out for a second like it was a controlled substance. And no one questioned it. It was just part of the ritual. Those purple-inked sheets were always slightly smudged, sometimes crooked, and occasionally still warm. If you got one fresh off the machine, it felt like winning a mini lottery. And sure, the text was sometimes blurry and the ink might stain your fingers, but who cared? You didn't look at those copies for clarity. You looked at them because they meant class was about to get a little less boring. Whether it was a pop quiz, a coloring page, or a spelling worksheet, Ditto copies brought a weird sense of joy to the school day. There was just something cooler about them than any laser printer could ever replicate. You couldn't copy that experience, literally. It was a moment frozen in the educational time capsule of the 1970s, and man, do we miss it. Waiting all week for your favorite show was an act of pure devotion. You didn't have streaming services or DVRs, you had time slots. And if you missed your show, that was it. No reruns until next summer. Maybe. You'd count down the days until Thursday or Friday night, begging the clock to move faster. When the intro music hit, everything stopped. Homework, ignored, phone calls, let it ring. This was your time. Families would huddle around the television like it was a sacred ritual. The glow from that giant box in the living room lit up your whole world. Shows like The Love Boat, The Brady Bunch, or Happy Days had a hold on us that no show ever could again. And the commercials? Somehow even they felt exciting. You would sit through the ads for sugary cereals or upcoming specials because the real reward was just a few moments away. There was no fast forward, no spoilers online, just raw anticipation. You could talk about the episode the next day at school and everyone would know exactly what you were talking about, because everyone saw the same thing at the same time. It was like being part of a club that only met once a week, and missing it felt like missing a chapter in your life story. Riding in shopping carts for fun was the original amusement park for kids. You'd climb into that metal basket with the reckless energy of a stunt double, bracing yourself as mom or dad pushed you down the grocery aisle like it was a racetrack. Every turn was a thrill. Every stop a chance to beg for sugar cereal or bubble gum. And that little kid seat near the handle? Elite status. That was your throne. But if you were small enough to squeeze your legs into the basket, even better. You'd bury yourself under paper towels and boxes of pasta like it was a fort and wave at strangers like royalty. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. One sudden break, and you'd be face first into a loaf of bread. Still, it was the highlight of the grocery run. Parents might have just seen it as a way to keep you from running wild, but to us, it was a ride better than anything Six Flags had to offer. Nowadays, it's frowned upon, liability and all that. But back in the 1970s, it was just what you did. You didn't walk through the grocery store. You cruised through it, snack aisle to dairy section, with a front row seat to the world of grown-up decisions. S&H green stamps were the currency of dreams. You didn't use them to buy candy or comic books. You earned them. Slowly. Painfully. One grocery trip at a time. Every time the cashier handed your mom a strip of those green stamps, it felt like the universe had just handed her a small fortune. You'd sit at the kitchen table, licking and pasting them into that brown paper booklet like you were crafting something sacred. It took forever. But the reward? That was the best part. You'd flip through the reward catalog like it was a Sears wish book for grown-ups, blenders, lamps, lawn chairs, even radios. Stuff you probably didn't need but had to have. And if you finally had enough stamps to get something, it was like Christmas and a lottery win rolled into one. Families would drive out to the redemption center and walk in like VIPs, trading sticky booklets for treasures. These little stamps had serious power, not because they were worth a lot on their own, but because they meant something bigger: teamwork, patience, and sweet delayed gratification. Try telling someone today that you once glued dozens of tiny green squares into a booklet just to get a toaster and watch them blink in confusion. Different times, simpler times. Vinyl record crackles and album art? That was the true essence of listening to music. You didn't just play a record, you experienced it. You'd pull that black disc out of its sleeve, careful not to smudge it, and gently set the needle down. Then came that delicious crackle, like a warm-up act before the real show. That sound told you something good was coming. And man, the album art. Whole worlds lived in those covers. Whether it was the psychedelic chaos of a Yes album or the clean mystery of a Fleetwood Mac cover, you could stare at that thing for hours. Some of them even had lyrics printed inside, or weird band photos that made you feel like you were part of the crew. You weren't just a listener, you were in the audience, front row, with a backstage pass made of cardboard. You'd flip the record halfway through like it was a ceremony, a pause, a breath. Streaming today is great and all, but let's be honest, it lacks soul. Back then, your room would fill up with music, and you'd lie on your floor, eyes closed, letting every sound wash over you. That little crackle and pop wasn't a flaw, it was a heartbeat. That ice cream truck jingle, you still hear it in your dreams. Neighborhood ice cream trucks in the 1970s were something else entirely. That sound would creep in from a block away, echoing through the summer heat, and boom, every kid within earshot was gone. It didn't matter if you were barefoot, in pajamas, or halfway through dinner. You sprinted. The truck always played the same music, over and over. That slightly warped melody that somehow never got old. You didn't care what kind of day you were having. If that truck rolled into your street, things were about to turn around. Every kid had a favorite: bomb pops, creamsicles, chocolate tacos, push-up pops. Some even had trading systems in place, like tiny Wall Street deals with popsicle sticks as currency. And when you finally got your ice cream, you'd sit on the curb, legs dangling, sticky fingers, and no thoughts, just happiness. For parents, it was a small price to pay for peace and quiet. For kids, it was a pure shot of joy. No apps, no tracking, just your ears and your gut instinct. You knew that music, you felt it. And when it got louder, your heart raced, because that sound meant one thing. Summertime was here, and it came with sprinkles. TV sign-offs with the national anthem were oddly emotional. You'd be up late, maybe too late, watching reruns or an old black and white movie, and then it would happen. That slow fade to a waving flag. A voice would solemnly thank you for watching. Then the anthem would play. Stars and stripes waving, sometimes an eagle soaring. It was like television itself was saying goodnight to America. You'd sit there, half asleep, maybe holding a bowl of cereal, watching the screen fade into static. It was eerie and beautiful all at once. In a weird way, it made you feel connected to your country, to your neighbors, to that strange glow of the television that just told you bedtime was no longer optional. For kids, it meant the fun was officially over. For adults, it was a cue to finally head to bed. And for night owls, it was the signal that the world was shutting down for a bit. No more shows, no more noise, just the quiet hum of static and a dark screen staring back. You might never see a TV sign-off again, but back in the day, it was how you knew the day had truly ended. Crocheted afghans on every couch were more than just decor. They were a warm hug from someone's grandma, even if she didn't live there. These colorful, handmade blankets were draped over every armrest, every cushion, like it was part of some sacred house rule in the 1970s. You had the ones with zigzag patterns in orange, brown, and mustard yellow, or maybe that giant square in a square look, like a rainbow exploded and someone stitched it back together. They weren't always soft. Sometimes they were a little scratchy, but man, were they cozy. You'd wrap yourself up during Saturday morning cartoons or pass out underneath one during an afternoon nap you swore you weren't going to take. If you ever visited someone's house and they didn't have at least one, it almost felt wrong. Afghans were heirlooms, conversation starters, and proof someone in the house had patience and a crochet hook. And no matter how wild the pattern was, it always made the room feel more like home. It didn't matter if the furniture was outdated or the wood paneling made everything look dim. If there was a crocheted Afghan in the mix, you were in the right place. Plastic covers on the good furniture were like seatbelts for your sofa. Uncomfortable, loud, and completely necessary if you asked any grown-up in the 1970s. You'd walk into your aunt's living room and it would shine. Not because it was fancy, but because everything was encased. Clear, thick plastic stretched so tight over the couch cushions it creaked when you sat down. It was like sitting on a Ziploc bag full of air. And in the summer? Forget about it. The back of your thighs would stick to that thing like glue and you'd have to peel yourself off just to stand up. But still, people kept it on. Why? Because the good furniture was never meant to be sat on. It was meant to be preserved just in case the Queen of England dropped by for tea in a surprise visit to Ohio. And heaven help you if you spilled juice or left a cracker crumb. Those plastic shields protected against everything except shame. As weird as it sounds now, those covers were everywhere. They were part of the aesthetic. And somehow, they made the house feel more grown up. We didn't question it. We just shifted uncomfortably and watched our Saturday night programs like everything was normal. Earth-toned kitchens with avocado green appliances were basically the personality of every home in the 1970s. You opened the front door and boom, you were hit with a wall of brown, orange, and pea green that practically screamed fondue party. The fridge? Avocado green. The stove? Avocado green. The Tupperware? Also avocado green. It was like the world ran out of regular colors and decided that everything in your kitchen needed to look like a salad. And the walls? Usually covered in wallpaper that had some kind of fruit basket pattern, or maybe fake wood grain? You didn't question it. You just grabbed a snack and sat at the brown formica table like a champ. These kitchens had personality. You could smell coffee, pot roast, and lemon pledge all at once. The countertops were usually laminate and the floors were linoleum, and it somehow all worked together. It wasn't flashy, but it was warm. These were the kinds of places where everyone gathered, even if there was a living room 10 feet away. They weren't stylish by today's standards, but they had heart. And a whole lot of burnt orange. Avocado green might have gone out of fashion, but if you grew up in it, there's something about that color that still feels like home. Holly Hobby lunchboxes and thermoses were the ultimate badge of honor on the school playground. If you had one, you weren't just someone with a sandwich and a juice, you were carrying a whole vibe. That shy little bonnet-wearing girl painted on the side of a bright metal box meant something. It meant you had style. Inside? Usually a peanut butter sandwich, some carrot sticks, maybe a Hostess cupcake if your parents were feeling generous. And right next to it? That matching thermos, complete with its little plastic cup for a lid. No spills, no nonsense, just warm soup or lukewarm milk depending on the day. These lunchboxes weren't just containers. They were statements. They had character. They had dents. They had stories. You'd bang them against the table just to get attention, then slide them into your cubby like you were parking a Cadillac. And if you didn't have Holly Hobby, maybe you had Scooby-Doo or Evel Knievel. But everyone knew exactly what you brought by the box you carried. Lunch was less about nutrition and more about showing off your taste. And no matter how chipped the paint got or how weird the thermos smelled by spring, you kept it, because that lunchbox was yours. Tang and powdered drink mixes were the golden tickets to flavor on a budget. You weren't sipping organic juice or artisan soda, you were dumping a fluorescent orange powder into a plastic pitcher and calling it a day. Tang was marketed as the drink of astronauts, and that was all the sales pitch anyone needed. Suddenly, every kid thought they were training for a mission to the moon just by having a glass with lunch. You'd stir and stir and stir until the water turned radioactive orange, and that first sip, pure sugar-fueled joy. And Tang wasn't alone. There were knockoffs, spin-offs, and cousins like Kool-Aid and Country Time lemonade. All of them came in canisters with tight plastic lids that somehow always got lost. You'd scoop the powder with the lid itself or whatever was close by. No measuring required. Just vibes. Some moms mixed them up and stored them in milk jugs, and others let the kids do it, which usually resulted in neon countertops and permanent finger stains. It wasn't exactly gourmet, but it was ours. A glass of Tang after riding bikes or playing tag was the cherry on top of a perfect 1970s afternoon. No fancy hydration needed, just water, sugar, and a dream. School film strips with beeps to turn the slide were the height of educational technology in the 1970s. You'd walk into the classroom and see that big, bulky projector sitting there like a treasure chest of knowledge and boredom. The teacher would dim the lights, push a button, and suddenly, click, you were on a magical ride through the solar system, or the digestive system, or whatever chapter the textbook was stuck on. Every time you heard that soft little beep, it was your cue. Time to change the slide. And if the teacher trusted you enough to be the beep turner, instant classroom celebrity. The film strip itself was usually grainy, with colors that felt a little washed out and a narrator that sounded like he needed a nap. Still, it was a break from normal class. No pop quiz, no chalkboard, just 30 minutes of darkened silence, beeps, and the hum of the projector fan. Sometimes the audio would cut out and you'd just sit there, awkwardly waiting for instructions. But that was part of the charm. These little learning breaks were slow, low budget, and totally memorable. Beep, turn the slide. Repeat. It might sound boring now, but back then, it was practically a movie premiere. Reading the TV guide cover to cover was a weekly ritual that turned every living room into a strategy session. You didn't just glance at it, you studied it. You planned your week around that thing. From Monday to Sunday, every show, every channel, every time slot was carefully laid out like it was a military operation. The fall preview issue? Legendary. That was like the Super Bowl of TV lovers. You'd flip through page after page of grainy headshots, show synopses and schedules that told you exactly when to plop down on the couch and tune in. The descriptions were tiny, the font was dense, and still, you read it all. Even the shows you had no intention of watching. Just in case. Families would argue over who got to pick what show at what time. Sometimes you'd highlight your picks, sometimes you'd write on it. But no matter what, the TV guide was gospel. And when you lost it, pure chaos. You had to guess what time the Waltons came on. That was dangerous living. TV Guide didn't just tell you what was on, it told you what mattered. It made television feel important, even if it was just cartoons and game shows. Clicking the channel dial on the TV was oddly satisfying, like cracking your knuckles but louder and with more purpose. You'd walk up to that giant wood-paneled television and click your way through every channel, even if there were only 12 of them. And let's be real, most of those were static. But you clicked them anyway, just in case. There was no remote control in sight unless you were lucky or rich. You were the remote. Parents would yell from the couch, "Change it to Channel 5!" And you'd march up, do your duty, and hope your siblings didn't make you do it again 5 minutes later. Each click had weight, a little chunk of commitment, that satisfying ka-chunk noise as you dialed through the possibilities. And if the knob broke, oh no. Then you were turning it with pliers, maybe even the edge of a spoon, because you had to get to your show and you weren't about to miss the $6 Million Man over a faulty dial. Nowadays, we swipe through hundreds of channels with a thumb. But back then, finding something to watch meant standing up, walking to the set, and clicking your way to destiny. Book covers made from grocery bags were peak 1970s DIY. You'd sit at the kitchen table with scissors and a paper bag from the local store, transforming something that once held apples and bread into a protective shield for your social studies book. It was like arts and crafts, but with higher stakes. If your cover fell off, you risked pages bending, or worse, teacher wrath. First, you cut off the bottom of the bag. Then you opened it up, smoothed it out, and got to work folding. The corners had to be tight, the creases sharp, and if you were fancy, you decorated it. Your name in bubble letters, doodles of rainbows, lightning bolts, or band logos. Maybe some hearts if you were bold. Every student had their own style, and every book looked just a little different. It was practical, it was personal, and it meant you were ready to take on whatever chapter came next. These covers weren't pretty, but they got the job done. They lasted through backpack drops, spilled milk, and whatever else a school day could throw at them. You could almost tell how much someone liked a subject by how neat their book cover looked. Algebra? Torn and wrinkled. English? Pristine. Brown corduroy. Everything was the unofficial uniform of the 1970s. Pants, jackets, Overalls, if it could be made of corduroy, someone wore it. And not just any color. Brown. Deep, rich, burnt toast brown. It was like every kid and every adult was auditioning for the same folk band. Corduroy had a sound, too. That swish-swish noise when you walked down the hallway, rubbing leg against leg like a percussion instrument. And sure, it wasn't exactly breathable. Sitting in it too long meant your thighs turned into an oven, but it looked sharp. That ribbed texture made you feel like you were dressed for success, even if you were just going to homeroom. And teachers loved it. So did parents. Corduroy had this weird charm. It made kids look grown up and made adults look responsible. Even backpacks came in corduroy. Sometimes your whole outfit matched from top to toe and nobody batted an eye. Was it stylish? At the time, absolutely. Today, questionable. But there's something undeniably nostalgic about those brown corduroy pants that stuck to your legs in the summer and practically froze solid in the winter. One glance at a photo from 1977, and you know, yup, that's corduroy season. The smell of freshly lit incense sticks in the 1970s could instantly change the whole vibe of a room. One spark, a little puff of smoke, and suddenly your living room turned into a meditation retreat, or at least it felt that way. Whether it was sandalwood, patchouli, or some mysterious blend with a name like Mystic Rain, incense carried this earthy, heady scent that made you want to sit cross-legged and question the meaning of life. You'd light one end with a match, watch the little flame burn, then blow it out gently until the smoke started dancing. That thin trail rising into the air wasn't just fragrance, it was mood. And let's be honest, a lot of folks weren't just burning it for the smell. Some used it to cover up, well, other smoky scents. Either way, the result was the same: peace, calm, and the unmistakable feeling that you were doing something deep. It was cheap, easy, and gave you a little pocket of zen right in the middle of your shag-carpeted chaos. Light one now, and if you close your eyes, you can still hear Fleetwood Mac in the background and feel the lava lamp glowing. Bicentennial everything in 1976 turned the whole country into one giant red, white, and blue party. If it could be painted, stitched, or stamped with a star or stripe, it was. From lunchboxes and t-shirts to cans of soda and entire cars, the bicentennial spirit didn't just knock on your door, it kicked it down waving a flag. Even if you didn't care about history class, you cared about 1776 in that moment. It was America's 200th birthday, and everyone went all out. School desks had little colonial flags on them. Kids wore bell-bottoms with eagles embroidered on the back pockets. Even the ice cream truck started carrying patriotic pops that looked like mini versions of the flag. Gas stations gave out commemorative glasses. Cereal boxes were covered in founding fathers. Fireworks that summer? Off the charts. But it wasn't just about the stuff. There was a real sense of pride, like everyone finally agreed on something for once. Communities came together for parades, cookouts, and town festivals. People were learning how to spell bicentennial just so they could shout about it. And let's not forget the TV specials. You could not flip through channels without finding a bald eagle montage set to brass-heavy music. For one weird, wonderful year, we were all on the same overly decorated page, and honestly, it kind of ruled. Wood-paneled station wagons were the unofficial mascot of suburban America in the 1970s. These cars weren't just vehicles. They were rolling living rooms with seat belts, big, boxy, and impossible to miss. They had that signature faux wood stripe running along the sides, like someone had the brilliant idea to turn a pine cabinet into a mode of transportation. But hey, it worked. They could fit your entire family, the dog, your neighbor's kid, 3 coolers, and a week's worth of groceries. And somehow there was still room in the back for a stack of lawn chairs. Most of us remember being stuck in the rear-facing back seat, waving at the drivers behind us like weird little royalty. And forget cup holders. Those didn't exist. You just hoped your orange soda didn't roll under the brake pedal. Road trips were a rite of passage. You'd get stuck on the highway playing I Spy while sweating through your corduroys and watching the scenery blur past. You were probably miserable in the moment. But now? Now it's the stuff of golden memories. Those wagons were loud, clunky, and totally impractical by today's standards, but they were ours. Using payphones and memorizing phone numbers was a full-time survival skill in the 1970s. If you were out and about and needed to call home, you had one option: find a payphone and hope it worked. And when you did, you'd dig through your pockets or purse for a dime, later a quarter, and jam it into the slot with a little prayer. Half the time, the receiver was sticky. The other half, it smelled like sadness and bubblegum. But that didn't matter. You needed to make your call. No contacts list, no stored numbers. You had to know that 7-digit sequence by heart. Maybe you had a folded piece of paper in your wallet with your best friend's number written in ballpoint pen. Or maybe you just repeated it enough times it became part of your DNA. Kids today have no idea what it's like to remember 7, 10, sometimes dozens of phone numbers just to function. And if you lost that scrap of paper, game over. Call collect or go home. The sound of the rotary dial, the little click as each number spun back into place, it was oddly comforting. Every call felt important. Every conversation was intentional. There was no scrolling, no swiping, just you, the receiver, and a coin's worth of connection. Metal roller skates with keys were the perfect mix of chaos and freedom. Before fancy rollerblades or sleek sneaker skates, you had 2 metal frames you clamped onto your sneakers, tightened with a special key, and hoped for the best. These things didn't have brakes. They barely had traction. But when you clipped them onto your shoes and stood up wobbling on the sidewalk, it felt like the whole world was suddenly your roller rink. You kept that skate key on a shoelace around your neck or in your pocket like it was treasure. Lose it, and you might as well be barefoot. Adjusting the skates was a science. Too tight? Blisters? Too loose? Wipeout city? But once you got moving, man, it was magic. You'd glide down the driveway or circle the block like you were training for the roller derby. Pavement cracks were mortal enemies. Hills were both temptation and death traps. But the thrill? Totally worth it. If you fell, you got up. If your wheel flew off mid-skate, you laughed and limped home. It was part of the experience. Today's kids have light-up wheels, Bluetooth speakers, and safety gear with more padding than a mattress. But we had the clank of metal on cement and the wind in our hair. And honestly, that was enough. There was a cereal called Crazy Cow that turned your milk chocolate or strawberry, and it had a mascot that laughed when milk hit it. Breakfast in the 1970s was loud, sugary, and sometimes strangely magical. Enter Crazy Cow, the cereal that promised a flavor explosion in your bowl. It came in 2 varieties, chocolate and strawberry, and the gimmick was simple. Pour milk on it, and the milk would instantly change color and flavor. The cereal pieces were corn puffs coated in a dusty layer of mystery powder, which dissolved and tinted the milk like edible dye. Kids were obsessed, not because it was healthy, definitely not, but because it was fun. The mascot was a grinning, wacky cartoon cow that supposedly laughed when the milk hit it. There was no sound, of course, but in your head, you heard that giggle every time. You felt like a scientist mixing a tasty experiment. It was a sugar rush, a cartoon, and a chemistry project rolled into one. Even if it got soggy in 5 minutes, the fun never wore off. You begged for it at the grocery store. You drank the pink or brown milk like it was a treat from Willy Wonka. It turned breakfast into a show, and when the box ran out, it felt like the end of an era. Crazy Cow disappeared in the early 1980s, but those who remember it still smile at the thought of that first splash of milk turning bright and sweet. It was not just cereal. It was a performance in a bowl. Neon everything was not a trend. It was a takeover. Shirts, socks, shoelaces, scrunchies. If it could be worn, it could be neon. Bright pinks, electric greens, yellows so vivid they could stop traffic. Walk into a classroom in the 1980s, and you might see a dozen students glowing like highlighters. It was not subtle. It was not sophisticated. But it was unforgettable. Neon made sure you were seen from across the street. Or the roller rink. Entire outfits were built around one blinding shade. And the braver kids, they mixed them. A neon blue shirt with neon orange shorts and lime green shoelaces. Why not? Matching was optional. Visibility was everything. Neon told the world you were loud, proud, and unbothered by what anyone else thought. It showed up in birthday parties, aerobics tapes, and mall photo booths. Looking back now, it seems like a color explosion. But that was the magic. Neon was confidence in color form. It was youth, amplified. It was chaos, celebrated. And for those who wore it without a hint of irony, it was the brightest part of a decade that refused to dim. Plastic covers on the living room couch weren't just about protecting furniture, they were a full-body punishment. That shiny, crinkly shell turned every TV night into a sweaty endurance test. You'd sit down and immediately hear it. Squeak, shift, squeak. In summer? Forget it. Your thighs stuck to that thing like melted fruit snacks. In winter? It was cold, slippery, and loud enough to wake the dog. And yet, no one questioned it. Plastic covers meant that couch would stay pristine forever, untouched by juice spills, cookie crumbs, or stray crayons. Unless company came over, that couch was off limits. Or worse, only available if you didn't squirm too much. You'd perch on the edge like it was sacred ground, afraid to wrinkle the vinyl or shift your weight. Even the dog got banished to the floor. The whole room was nice in theory, but functioned like a museum exhibit for a life you didn't quite live. It looked fancy, smelled faintly of Lysol, and felt like a plastic slip and slide with no fun at the end. Your back hurt, your legs sweated, and you had permanent plastic imprints on your calves. But hey, it kept the furniture looking good, right? Unfortunately, your dessert didn't always follow the same logic. Limited or no air conditioning meant summer nights were a battle with the heat. The box fan sat in the window, humming like a tired engine, barely moving the thick air. You sweated through your sheets, drank warm water, slept with the lights off and the windows wide open, hoping for a breeze that never came. Some homes had one window unit, and it stayed in the living room. Everyone gathered there like refugees from the sun. No one moved. The couch was soaked in humidity. Tempers flared, ice trays emptied fast. You wore as little as possible, stuck your head in the fridge, and counted the hours until dark. At school, kids talked about central air. You could not imagine it. The idea of a whole house being cool felt like science fiction. You made popsicles out of juice in ice cube trays. You wrapped wet washcloths around your neck. You laid on the floor, hoping the tile was cooler than the bed. And through it all, you survived. Uncomfortable, sticky, and half asleep, but alive. No air conditioning was not ideal, but it made you tough, and it taught you how to endure heat, not just in your house, but in life. Screwed directly into the wall, these heavy-duty wall-mounted can openers were as stubborn as they were convenient. Usually found right next to the stove or sink, they were the type of kitchen gadget you used without thinking, until you bumped your head into one or sliced your finger trying to clean it. You locked in the can, turned the large handle, and heard that satisfying scrape as the lid peeled away. And it never moved. That was the point. It was always there, ready to go. Back then, cans did not have pop-tops, and handheld openers were prone to rust or breaking. So this chunky mechanical beast became part of the kitchen wall like a light switch. It made even the smallest task feel intentional, like you were part of a well-oiled machine. And it never broke, because it was made to be used, not replaced. Some people even bragged about how fast they could open a can of tomato soup. But as kitchens modernized and designers chose clean lines over utility, wall-mounted can openers became kitchen fossils. They were ripped out and tossed away, their holes patched up and painted over. Now, most folks do not even recognize them. But if you ever find one, run your hand along the gear teeth. It might just stir something in you. Why did we stop building things to stay put? They were not just dolls, they were your children. Adopted, named, cared for like living, breathing extensions of your heart. Cabbage Patch Kids exploded into American homes like nothing else before them. Chubby cheeks, yarn hair, signed bottoms, they were adorable and slightly strange. But they were yours. No two were the same. That was the magic. It felt personal, like fate. Parents fought in department stores to get them. Shelves emptied in seconds. News clips showed grown adults wrestling over plush plastic babies. It was not just a toy. It was a phenomenon. And it swept through the country like a fever dream. Kids brought them everywhere, to school, to bed, to dinner. They came with birth certificates and backstories, turning playtime into family drama. In an age of make-believe, these dolls made things feel real. The craze might sound ridiculous today, but in the moment, it was everything. A doll you had to adopt? That was not just marketing, it was genius. It made you feel responsible, important, part of something. And when the madness faded, what was left was a memory of wide-eyed joy, pure affection, and a little friend who made childhood feel alive. Kids could mail away for X-ray specs that promised to see through skin. Spoiler, they didn't work, but the ads were everywhere. If you ever flipped through a comic book in the 1970s, you probably saw it. A tiny black and white ad promising X-ray vision. All you had to do was send in a couple of dollars and wait for the magic glasses to arrive by mail. No batteries, no wires, just cardboard frames and the promise of superpowers. The specs usually came in a paper envelope, and when you slipped them on, the results were disappointing. Instead of seeing bones or someone's underwear, you got blurry shadows and maybe a little double vision. Still, you strutted around like you had government tech on your face. You tested it on your hand 100 times, hoping your bones would suddenly appear. You convinced your friend it worked, until he made you prove it. You squinted at the family dog like you were diagnosing it. And when the headache kicked in, you just said, "That means it's working." Still, it felt like a piece of the impossible had arrived in your mailbox. You wore them around the house. You tried them on your hand, your dog, your little brother. And for 5 minutes, you believed. Even if your head hurt afterward, it was junk. But it was the best kind of junk. Every kid got fooled at least once, and most of us loved every second of it. It was not about the actual X-ray vision. It was about imagination, mystery, and the excitement of believing something might be real, even if it was not. Waterbeds promised the future and delivered waves of regret. On paper, they were perfect, a heated mattress that cradled your body like a floating dream. But in practice, not so much. Every turn sent ripples across the surface. You tried to roll over, and the whole bed sloshed like a bathtub during an earthquake. Getting in without making a tidal wave was a skill. Getting out without sliding to the floor was an Olympic event. They were heavy, hard to move, and leaked at the worst times, usually at 3 in the morning, soaking everything from socks to shag carpet. Still, they were trendy. If someone had a waterbed, it meant they were either incredibly cool or easily convinced by an in-store demo. Some people swore by them. Others swore at them. Pets hated them. Kids loved jumping on them until they learned that waterbeds and sharp objects do not mix. But for a brief, glorious window in the 1980s, having a waterbed meant you had arrived. It was furniture and flex all in one. Looking back, they were impractical, ridiculous, and unforgettable. And somewhere, in a dusty corner of a basement, one is still gently sloshing, waiting for its comeback. 2 kids in one twin bed was not a punishment. It was standard practice. The mattress sagged in the middle, the blanket never covered both people at once, and the sheet always came untucked by midnight. You'd start out politely, 1 kid on each side. By morning, it was a tangle of elbows, knees, and dreams interrupted by someone snoring. If you were lucky, you were the bigger sibling and claimed the wall side. If you were the youngest, you got the foot warmer job, curled sideways across the bottom like a human space heater. The springs creaked like an old barn door. The pillow smelled like every head that ever used it, and the mattress was more duct tape than fabric. But it was a bed, and you didn't question it. You whispered secrets under the covers, argued over the blanket, and negotiated elbow room like diplomats. Nobody had a canopy bed or memory foam mattress. Just a squeaky twin, shared love, and nightly negotiations. And if you wanted privacy, you faked sleep. But the real test of patience and strategy came when you tried making a call on a phone that looked like it had been through war. Shared bedrooms among siblings meant privacy was a myth and bedtime was an adventure. 2, sometimes 3 kids in one room, bunk beds, fold-out couches, mattresses on the floor. You learned to sleep through snoring, giggling, and whispered arguments over who stole the blanket. One lamp lit the room. One drawer held everyone's socks. If you wanted quiet, you closed your eyes and hoped for sleep. But there was love there too. Late-night stories, secret jokes, a flashlight under the covers. You made forts out of sheets and built walls with pillows, pretending they were rooms of your own. You learned to share without thinking, to wait your turn, to keep secrets. Sure, you fought. You drew invisible lines down the mattress. But you also looked out for each other, listened when someone cried, celebrated the nights when no one got in trouble. Those cramped quarters built closeness you never asked for, but maybe needed. And years later, you remembered those rooms not for the lack of space, but for the way they held you together. Shared bedrooms were loud, messy, and full of life. And even now, you sometimes miss what it meant to fall asleep beside someone who knew you by heart. Before Bluetooth speakers and smart home assistants, there was the built-in wall radio. Usually installed near the phone nook or tucked into a panel above the kitchen counter, this was your portal to the world. With one turn of a giant knob, you could get the weather, farm reports, school closings, or your favorite midday jazz station. Some had small intercom buttons for calling upstairs or out to the garage. It was kitchen multitasking before anyone used the word. Moms would hum along while stirring soup or call the kids for dinner through the built-in speaker. You knew what time it was by the voice on the radio, not your phone. It was the soundtrack of daily life, soft static, local news, and old familiar jingles. Even the quiet moments felt fuller with it playing in the background. But as media moved to TV, then to handheld devices, these built-ins became obsolete. Wires were cut, faces painted over. Now, if you find one in an old house, it looks like a forgotten control panel from a spaceship. Once, it brought life into the kitchen. Now, it is just a silent square on the wall. We carry entire sound systems in our pockets today, but they do not echo down the hallway the same way. What did we lose when the kitchen stopped singing? Before Nintendo, video games were gasping for breath. After Nintendo, they were alive again. It was 1985 when the Nintendo Entertainment System hit American shelves and changed living rooms forever. The gray and red console was a Trojan horse, simple in design but hiding worlds inside. Suddenly, you were not just a kid. You were Mario, leaping through pipes to save the princess. You were Link, braving dungeons for the Triforce. You were part of something massive. Nintendo did not just bring games. It brought heroes. It brought soundtracks you could hum in your sleep and cheat codes whispered like secret spells. The controller became an extension of your hand. Blowing into cartridges felt like a ritual, and beating a level felt like beating life itself. For many, Nintendo was not a toy. It was a friend, a daily escape, a safe place to fail and try again. Families gathered around the screen, arguing over whose turn it was. Siblings became rivals, parents got curious, and the living room was never the same again. With every beep and pixel, Nintendo gave us wonder, and it never asked for anything more than time and imagination. Mood rings were originally marketed as medical devices, advertised to detect health issues by measuring your emotional state. Mood rings were not just for fun, they were science, or so the ads claimed. Each color was tied to a different feeling, or stress level, or health condition. The idea was simple. The ring's stone reacted to your body temperature. Supposedly, it could reveal how you felt. Blue for calm, black for stressed, green for average. In reality, it mostly just meant your hands were cold. But the illusion worked. Kids wore them like truth detectors. And for a minute, your finger could tell the world how your heart was doing. You stared at the ring, waiting for it to shift, like a mood magician. Some people thought it knew things they did not even know themselves. Others wore it just to look cool in the cafeteria. Even though it was basically a glorified thermometer, it felt like magic. And sometimes, that was enough. Mixtapes were handwritten love letters wrapped in cassette cases. You waited by the radio for hours just to hit record at the perfect moment, trying to catch the start of your favorite song without the DJ talking over it. You rewound, replayed, and carefully curated the perfect order so each track melted into the next. Some were made for crushes, others for best friends. Some were sorry tapes, and some were just because. Each one had a theme, a purpose, and a heart behind it. You picked songs that said what you could not. Then you labeled the tape in your best handwriting, maybe decorated the case, and handed it over like it was treasure. Because it was. A great mixtape took hours, sometimes days, to get just right. And when someone gave you one, you listened to it until the tape wore thin and the sound warped. Mixtapes were not just music. They were memories, feelings, time capsules wrapped in magnetic ribbon. And long after the songs faded, you remembered the person who made it, their handwriting, their choices, their message. Even now, in a world of playlists, nothing hits quite like the soft click of a tape deck and a song you once recorded just for someone else. Television dinners were not just food, they were theater. When one showed up on your dinner plate, you knew something special was happening. Maybe your parents were going out. Maybe someone was sick. Maybe it was just Friday. But when you heard that crinkle of foil and saw the segmented tray slide onto your television tray table, you knew you'd hit the jackpot. Salisbury steak, watery mashed potatoes, limp green beans, and that one magical brownie square that always cooked too hard around the edges and too soft in the middle. You ate every bite with reverence while the Brady Bunch played in the background and your legs dangled off the shag-carpeted couch. The smell of aluminum and artificial gravy filled the room like a beacon of midweek joy. You didn't care that the corn tasted like metal or that the peas had fused into a green blob. This was high living. This was luxury. This was your 5-star meal in a tin. And the tray? Sometimes reused, sometimes thrown away, but always remembered. It was dinner without dishes, calories without questions, and warmth without work. And if you were lucky, no one asked you to share your brownie. But once you cleaned your tray and threw away the evidence, it was time to climb into the family car, which probably came with more ventilation than you bargained for. Warming drawers used to be the quiet hero of the kitchen, especially when dinner was not ready all at once. Tucked just below the oven, this thin, shallow drawer kept plates warm so that food would not go cold before it reached the table. You would set it to low, slide in your dishes, and when the roast came out, everything was ready to serve piping hot. This feature was a nod to formality. Meals meant something, and every detail mattered. Back then, no one wanted to pile roast beef onto a cold plate. But as life sped up and microwaves took over, warming drawers started disappearing. They took up space. They were easy to forget about. And soon, they felt like a relic of a more elegant time. Builders stopped including them in standard models, and even higher-end kitchens started to phase them out. Now, if you see one, it is usually mistaken for a storage drawer. But once, it meant warmth, literally and figuratively. It meant taking care, not just serving food. When did we stop setting the table like it was worth it? Saturday mornings were sacred. You rolled out of bed in your pajamas, poured a sugary mountain of cereal, and turned on the television like it was a portal to another world. And what greeted you? Magic. Pure animated magic. Shows like He-Man, Transformers, DuckTales, and the Smurfs made those few hours feel like a festival of joy. These were not just cartoons, they were lifelines. The stories were bold, the heroes fearless, and the villains just scary enough to make victory feel earned. You learned about justice from turtles in bandanas, loyalty from robotic cars, and friendship from ponies with glittering eyes. Commercial breaks were an art form. The toys matched the shows, and the shows matched your dreams. This was marketing fused with myth-making, and we loved every second. Your parents saw it as noise, but you knew better. It was a weekly escape from school, chores, and whatever sadness the week might have brought. Those mornings felt endless, like time itself was bending in your favor. The television glowed with color and hope. And as the final credits rolled and the sun climbed higher, you held on to those last cartoon moments like a secret handshake only kids understood. NASA had to issue a statement saying Tang wasn't invented by them. The drink was so tied to space missions, people thought astronauts created it. Tang was not born in a spaceship, but it sure felt like it. Kraft Foods invented Tang in the 1950s. It was orange. It was powdered. It looked like science. Then NASA brought it aboard Gemini missions, and suddenly, Tang became the official drink of outer space. Kids drank it to feel like astronauts. The label basically screamed, "From the moon." But the truth? NASA just used it. They did not make it. And when the rumor spread too far, they had to issue a public statement to clear it up. NASA tried to be clear, but the public had already made up their minds. Commercials leaned hard into the space theme anyway. Moms poured Tang like it was rocket fuel. It became a badge of childhood, like sneakers with Velcro or a favorite lunchbox. No one cared who made it, as long as it came in that bright orange tub. Did it stop anyone from buying it? Not at all. Tang was a breakfast table badge of honor, even if it tasted like vitamin dust. Trapper Keepers were not just school supplies, they were status symbols. With their Velcro flaps and glossy, over-the-top covers, they turned every classroom into a silent competition of who had the coolest binder. Some featured racing cars. Others showed rainbows, unicorns, or abstract laser patterns straight out of a sci-fi fever dream. Inside, everything was neatly organized. Folders, dividers, loose-leaf paper, and secret notes passed during math class. The Velcro made a loud rip every time you opened it, an announcement that learning was about to begin, or at least be attempted. Trapper Keepers made you feel like you had your life together, even if your grades said otherwise. Teachers had a love-hate relationship with them. They were bulky, distracting, but undeniably effective at keeping your stuff in one place. And if you had one with a matching pencil case, you were royalty. Years later, people still remember the smell of the plastic, the feel of flipping through those laminated folders, and the thrill of sliding in a new pack of notebook paper. Trapper Keepers were not just for school, they were for showing off, staying organized, and feeling like you had a little piece of the future in your backpack. The thermostat in a 70s house wasn't just a dial, it was a line in the sand. Parents treated it like a sacred relic, never to be touched without permission or a written declaration of frostbite. You'd be freezing, fingers like popsicles, and Mom would say, "Put on a sweater," then a second sweater, then a blanket, then maybe sit under the dog. Turning on the heat was seen as weak, wasteful, or wildly indulgent. Some families taped a note over the thermostat. "Do not touch unless you're paying the bill." That thing could be in the dead center of the wall, glowing orange with temptation, and no one dared twist it. Space heaters? Risky. They blew fuses or caught socks on fire. Electric blankets? A luxury item only Grandpa had, and he kept it locked in the closet. You'd go to bed in socks, sweats, and a hoodie, buried under 5 layers like you were camping in the Arctic. Quilts were piled on like sandbags, and your breath made little clouds in the morning. But no one ever turned the heat up, not unless company was coming over or someone got the flu. Even then, it was only for an hour. And while your toes might have been numb, your shoes weren't much better, especially when they had their own built-in air conditioning. Hand-me-down clothing told a story stitched in faded colors and stretched-out sleeves. In homes where money was tight, new clothes were a luxury reserved for Christmas or growth spurts too dramatic to ignore. Everything else? Hand-me-downs, jeans worn thin at the knees, shirts a size too big, coats that smelled like someone else's winter. You learned to cuff sleeves and roll pant legs. You got good at pretending it was your style all along. Sometimes it came from older siblings, sometimes from cousins or neighbors. There was no shame at home, it was just life. But at school, it was different. Kids noticed. They asked where you got it. Or worse, they recognized it from someone else's closet. You laughed it off, or changed the subject, or just said nothing at all. You knew every patch, every stain, every repair your mom made after dinner. These clothes had been through it, just like you. And maybe they were not fashionable, maybe they sagged or pinched or hung wrong, but they lasted. And for families with more love than money, hand-me-downs were not second best. They were just what came next. And they carried you through, one button at a time. If any of these blasts from the past made you smile, tell us which one hit you hardest in the comments. Give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe so we can keep spinning the nostalgic record together.